بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته, and welcome to Fiqh al-Muamalat online course. And today we shall carry on the discussions on the asset of Murabahah. Of course, to remind you, just start a few sessions on the assets. So we are still in the asset of Murabahah, and the asset of Murabahah is the Mawdu' al-Aqd, the subject matter of Murabahah. And as you know, we have in the Murabahah the subject matter, which is the asset and the price. So we are still in the asset, and after the asset, we move to the price. So the following point on the asset is that the right and the liability, or the right and the liability of the purchaser as the owner of the asset shall be established upon the possessions of the asset. So basically, when the transaction is completed in Murabahah and the purchasers claim ownership, as a result of that, the rights and liability would be transferred respectively to the purchaser upon, of course, the possessions. And when we say possessions here of the asset, it could be constructive possessions or basically physical possessions. So the delivery is one of the criteria and responsibility of the seller. You cannot do the sales and do ijab and qabul, and that's it. That's the responsibility of the purchaser to take the asset. So it is the responsibility of the seller to deliver the sold asset to the purchaser. And of course, here it depends on the arrangements and what kind of understanding and agreement has been done between the sellers and the buyer. But whatever has been agreed upon on the delivery matter should be honored. Sometimes, the delivery is that the purchaser will come and pick up the items. Let's say if it is a car from the warehouse, and sometimes it is delivered to his address, office, sometimes it is delivered to his house. And sometimes there is no delivery, but there is what's called a takhliya, right to access, like for example, immovable buildings, a residential area and lands and so on and so forth. So it depends on the nature, number one, of the asset, and number two, it depends what kind of arrangement. And even in the import and export, as you know, sometimes the price and the arrangement between the seller and the buyer is FOB, which means the responsibility of the sellers will stop upon putting the cargo on board. And sometimes the arrangement is CIF, so basically it is the responsibility of the sellers to deliver to the final destination of the port, including the coverage of the kafir or insurance. And sometimes it is a CNF, which is the final destinations, excluding the insurance, whereby the insurance lie with the responsibility of the purchaser. Here the bottom line is that, of course, we look at the asset, the nature of the asset, the nature of the arrangements, and the understanding, and so on and so forth. But in overall, the responsibility and liability and the accountability will start with the new purchaser upon the possessions of the asset, constructively or physically. The following point is that the sellers shall bear the liability for losses or damage of the asset before disposing the right of ownership. The disposing the right of ownership means takhliya, means giving the access to the purchaser to the asset, which result in the purchasers having accessibility to the asset, which is basically the word of tamkeen, meaning takhliya wa tamkeen, leave the access to the asset and the ability to basically use the asset as its new purchase items. So what we are saying here, before التخلية والتمكين, before the delivery, before the giving the right to the purchaser to access to the asset, giving the right to the purchaser to use the asset as he wishes. Before that, the liability, the responsibility is still with the what's called a seller, and in this case, with the financial institution. We are not selling here per se the financial institutions, because the sales these rules are applicable to Murabaha and to other than Murabaha, and these are applicable to the sellers, whether the sellers is the financial institution or otherwise, and the seller is not all the time is the financial institutions, could be a third party or any other parties. That's why we are using the language of the sellers. But in the most of the cases, when it's come to the sellers in Murabaha, typically it is the financial institution, because the financial institution is the one which provide the Murabaha financing and taking a position of a seller with the client. The following points on the asset that we would like to highlight is that multiple Murabaha contract shall not be entered into in the same time on the same asset. So you cannot put the subject matter of Murabaha, then you will come up with the multiple transactions, let's say 3, 4, 5 multiple transactions of Murabaha with the same buyer or even different buyers on the same asset. That one is not allowed, which means that one asset accommodates one transactions. And if we put this one in the context of the commodity Murabaha in the platforms, different platforms available. So if let's say you have 1,000, for the sake of arguments and giving example, if you have 1,000 metric ton of palm oil, so if the transactions is performed on 100, so the 100 will be excluded as long as the transactions did not finish its cycle. So if the second one comes in to do Murabaha, he will do on the balance, which is 900, and the third one will do on the 700, and the fourth one will do on the 600, and the fifth one will do on the 500s. So you cannot do on the commodity Murabaha, which is subject to the commodity Murabaha transactions with different clients, which means the asset accommodates one transactions, unless the first transactions finish its cycle and dispose the asset, so it goes back to the pool. The second finish, dispose back the asset, goes back to the pool. The third, the fourth, the fifth, so you go back to the initial volume, which is 1,000 metric ton, for example, of palm oil. You can do again a Murabaha or a commodity Murabaha on it. So bottom line here is that one single assets accommodate one single Murabaha transaction. The following point is that the Murabaha contract may enter into a group of assets between the same contracting party at the same time. That one is a different. We have here different assets, we have different assets. Let's say these 3 assets, or 4 or 5 or 6, and the financial institutions will perform a Murabaha with the same party. You can have a multiple Murabaha transactions on this group of assets, which means one financial institutions, one client to purchase orders, one clients, but we have a group of assets. So each transactions will be tied and tagged to one assets, the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. So you may have a facility agreement and you have a multiple transactions of Murabaha on a different assets, then that one is allowed and permissible, because again we go back to the same rules that each asset accommodates one single Murabaha. But you can put all this Murabaha transaction, multiple transactions of Murabaha in one single facility, in one pool with the same clients. And this one goes back to the other previous example that we give in the commodity Murabahah platforms, whereby you have one, let's say 1,000 metric ton of palm oil or dates or any kind of commodity. So what you can do, you can have multiple transactions of Murabahah, and sometimes they use it in the working capital, whereby you may have a line of credit of, let's say, 5 million. Then the drawdown builds on a different commodity Murabaha transactions. All the way depends on the arrangements between the financial institution and the clients. It could be every month, it could be every 15 days. It depends on the arrangements. Then one agreements will capture a pool of, let's say, 500 metric ton, subject to multiple transactions of a commodity Murabaha based on each, sorry, based on each transaction. That one is allowed. Again, the rules is that one, assets accommodator, one single Murabaha, but you have the liberty and the flexibility to put them in a pool, to put them in one facility, in one MOU, in a series of transactions. That one is left to you. And it could be with one single clients and one single financial institute, but multiple transactions under one single MOU, or independent. That one is a flexible. I think we'll come to a stop here, and we shall carry on the discussion of the asset of Murabaha in the coming sessions. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.